Most people will never get rich, not because money is hard to earn, but because they misunderstand how wealth is actually built. They chase effort, they chase motivation, they chase shortcuts, but they ignore the one principle that quietly separates the wealthy from everyone else. And once you see it, the world looks different, because the people who build wealth are not working harder than everyone else. They are thinking differently. Napoleon Hill spent more than 2 decades studying people who had accumulated massive fortunes: industrialists, inventors, entrepreneurs, men who started with nothing and ended with everything. And after studying thousands of lives, he discovered something surprising. The difference between the rich and the average person is not intelligence, it is not luck, it is not even opportunity. It is a mental pattern, a way of thinking about money, time, and effort that most people never learn. He'll describe this difference in simple terms. Average people trade time. Wealthy people build systems. That distinction sounds small, but it changes everything. Because when you trade time for money, your income always has a ceiling. There are only so many hours in a day. Only so much energy you can spend. Only so many tasks you can perform. So even if you become extremely skilled, even if you work harder than everyone else, your income is still chained to your effort, and chains have limits. The wealthy broke that chain a long time ago. They stopped asking, "How can I earn more money today?" and started asking a different question. How can I create something that continues earning even when I stop working? That question is the foundation of wealth, and it's the first secret average people never fully understand. Most people chase income. Wealthy people chase leverage. Leverage is the ability to produce results larger than your effort. It appears in many forms: ownership, investments, businesses, intellectual property, systems, technology. When you own something that produces value repeatedly, effort stops being linear. Instead of trading 1 hour for one payment, you create something that works again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. Napoleon Hill saw this pattern everywhere. The most successful people focused their energy on building assets, not just earning paychecks. And that single shift changed the trajectory of their lives. But here's where most people get stuck. They understand this idea intellectually, but emotionally they resist it, because building leverage feels uncomfortable at first. The early stage looks slow, uncertain, unrewarded. You might spend months working on something that produces nothing. No applause, no income, no visible success. And that's where average people stop. They interpret slow progress as failure. But Hill discovered something important. Wealth rarely appears gradually. It appears suddenly, after a long, invisible phase. During that invisible phase, effort is accumulating. Skills are improving. Systems are forming. But the outside world hasn't caught up yet. This delay destroys most people's motivation. They assume nothing is happening. But everything is happening. It's just happening beneath the surface. Hill called this the law of accumulation. Small efforts repeated consistently begin stacking. Then eventually, they produce results that looked like luck. But it was never luck. It was patience. Now here's the next secret average people misunderstand. They believe wealth requires huge actions, huge risks, huge ideas. But the truth is almost the opposite. Wealth is built from small, disciplined actions repeated over time. Consistency is the engine. Imagine 2 people starting with the same knowledge, the same opportunity, the same resources. One person makes steady progress every day, learning, building, improving. The other person works intensely for a few weeks, then disappears for months. Which one builds wealth faster? The answer is obvious. But most people still follow the second pattern. They chase bursts of effort instead of consistent progress. Napoleon Hill noticed that wealthy individuals had extraordinary patience. Not passive patience, Active patience. They were willing to build slowly, while everyone else chased fast results. This patience allowed compounding to work in their favor. Compounding is the quiet force behind every fortune. Money compounds, skills compound, reputation compounds, relationships compound, ideas compound. But compounding only works if you stay in the game long enough. And most people leave too early. They get frustrated. They change direction. They start over. And every restart resets the compound effect. Hill believed that persistence was one of the rarest qualities in the world. Not because persistence is difficult, but because it's boring. It lacks drama. It requires continuing when excitement disappears. But once persistence becomes habit, wealth creation accelerates, because the compound curve eventually bends upward. Another secret average people rarely understand is the role of belief. Hill wrote extensively about what he called definiteness of purpose. Wealthy people had a clear goal, a specific direction. They weren't drifting. They weren't exploring endlessly. They were building something. And once that purpose became clear, their energy aligned. Their decisions became simpler. Their attention narrowed. Purpose acts like gravity. It pulls your behavior toward a destination. Without it, effort scatters. And scattered effort rarely produces wealth. Average people move between ideas constantly. New opportunities, new plans, new distractions. But wealth is rarely built through scattered effort. It is built through concentrated energy applied to one direction long enough for results to appear. This is why Hill believed decision-making separated successful people from everyone else. Wealthy individuals made decisions quickly and changed them slowly. Average people delayed decisions and changed them constantly. Indecision destroys momentum. And momentum is the fuel of progress. Now here is another truth Hill observed. Wealth is rarely created alone. Behind almost every successful person is a network of collaborators, advisors, partners, mentors. He called this the mastermind principle. When two or more minds align toward a shared purpose, intelligence multiplies, ideas improve faster, mistakes are corrected earlier. Opportunities become visible sooner. Average people often isolate themselves. They try to solve every problem alone. But wealth builders surround themselves with people who challenge their thinking, expand their perspective, and accelerate their growth. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people say they want wealth, but their behavior says they want comfort. Comfort today almost always conflicts with wealth tomorrow. Building wealth requires delayed gratification, saving instead of spending, building instead of consuming, learning instead of relaxing, for months, sometimes for years. This is where the majority give up, because the rewards are delayed. Napoleon Hill believed desire was the starting point of all achievement, but desire alone was not enough. Desire must be backed by persistence, faith, planning, and action. Otherwise, it becomes wishful thinking. And wishful thinking produces nothing. Hill wrote something that still surprises readers today. Riches begin with a state of mind, not a bank account, not a job, not an opportunity, a mindset, a pattern of thinking that views obstacles differently, sees opportunity where others see risk, and continues moving when progress feels slow. Once that mindset forms, behavior changes automatically. And once behavior changes consistently, wealth begins to form. Now you might be wondering something. If these principles are so simple, why do so few people apply them? Because they are not emotionally satisfying in the short term. They require patience, discipline, consistency, qualities that rarely produce immediate rewards. But those same qualities produce enormous rewards later, and that is the paradox of wealth. The things that feel slow early become powerful later, while the things that feel exciting early often collapse. Napoleon Hill believed anyone could build wealth if they adopted the mental patterns of successful people, not by copying their careers, but by copying their thinking, their persistence, their focus, their willingness to delay comfort. Because wealth does not belong to a specific profession, it belongs to a specific mindset. But understanding the secret is only the first step, because the next step is far more important, applying it consistently. And that's where most people struggle. Which brings us to the next principle Napoleon Hill taught, the one that determines whether knowledge becomes wealth or remains just another interesting idea. Knowing the principle is not what creates wealth. Application does. And this is where most people quietly fail. They learn ideas. They watch videos. They read books. They feel inspired for a moment, but inspiration fades. And when inspiration fades, their behavior returns to normal. Napoleon Hill warned about this exact pattern. He said knowledge only becomes power when it is organized and directed toward action. Without action, knowledge is entertainment. The wealthy treat ideas differently. They test them. They build with them. They apply them long before they feel confident. Average people wait until they feel ready. But readiness almost never arrives, because readiness is created through action, not before it. This is why Hill emphasized one habit above almost everything else: decision followed by immediate action. The wealthy move quickly once they see a clear opportunity, not recklessly, but decisively. They understand that clarity improves during movement, not before it. Average people analyze. They debate, they seek reassurance, and by the time they finally decide, the opportunity has passed. Speed of action matters, but speed alone is not enough, because action without persistence leads nowhere. This brings us to one of Napoleon Hill's most powerful principles: persistence. Hill observed that many successful people failed repeatedly before achieving wealth. Businesses collapsed, ideas failed, investments lost money, but they continued. They adjusted their plans. They learned. They tried again. Most people interpret failure as a signal to stop. Successful people interpret failure as information. Information about what to improve, what to change, what to try next. This difference in interpretation creates entirely different lives. The person who quits after failure never reaches momentum. The person who continues eventually finds the approach that works. Hill described persistence as the quality that converts desire into riches. Without persistence, even the best plan eventually dies. But with persistence, even an imperfect plan can evolve into success. Now here's something Hill noticed that many people overlook. Persistence becomes easier when your environment supports it. This is where the mastermind principle becomes powerful again. When you surround yourself with ambitious people, your expectations rise. Your conversations change. Your goals expand. But when you surround yourself with people who avoid risk and fear failure, something else happens. Your ambition slowly shrinks, not because they are bad people, but because humans naturally adapt to their environment. The wealthy intentionally build environments that encourage growth. They seek mentors. They collaborate with driven individuals. They study people who have already achieved what they want. This constant exposure to higher standards changes how they think. And thinking determines action. Another critical insight Hill discovered involves belief, not blind optimism, but belief in the possibility of success. Hill called this the principle of faith. Faith strengthens persistence. When you believe effort will eventually produce results, you continue longer. When you doubt the outcome, quitting becomes easier. Faith influences behavior more than logic, because logic alone rarely sustains effort during difficult periods. But belief can. Hill suggested that belief can be trained through repetition, through visualization, through constantly reinforcing the idea that success is possible. Over time, the subconscious mind begins aligning behavior with that belief. You start acting in ways that support your goal without forcing it. Now, here's where many people misunderstand Hill's teachings. They assume faith means simply believing wealth will appear, but Hill never meant passive belief. Faith must be combined with organized planning and persistent action. Without action, belief is fantasy. But when belief and action combine, something powerful happens. Momentum forms. Momentum is the invisible engine behind success. At first, progress feels slow, painfully slow. You work, you build, you improve, and nothing changes externally. This is the stage where most people abandon the process. But if you continue long enough, something shifts. Opportunities appear, connections form, ideas gain traction, and the same effort that once produced nothing begins producing results. From the outside, it looks sudden, like an overnight success. But Hill understood that overnight success is usually the result of years of invisible preparation. Another secret Hill revealed involves the way wealthy individuals view money itself. Average people see money as something to spend. Wealth builders see money as something to plant. They treat money like a seed. Instead of consuming it immediately, they place it into assets, businesses, investments, systems that generate additional income. Over time, those seeds multiply. And eventually, the income produced by assets exceeds the income produced by effort. This is the moment where wealth truly begins, because your money starts working harder than you do. But this stage only arrives after long periods of disciplined behavior. Saving instead of spending, building instead of consuming, investing instead of upgrading lifestyle. He'll often explain that wealth requires delayed gratification, the willingness to sacrifice comfort today for freedom tomorrow. Unfortunately, modern culture promotes the opposite: instant gratification, immediate rewards, constant consumption. These habits destroy the possibility of long-term wealth, because wealth is built quietly, patiently, and often invisibly. Hill also emphasized imagination, not fantasy, practical imagination, the ability to combine knowledge and experience to create new opportunities. Many fortunes were built by people who saw possibilities others ignored. But imagination alone is not enough. It must be supported by action. Ideas that remain in the mind create nothing. Ideas applied consistently can build entire industries. This is why Hill believed every successful person becomes both a dreamer and a builder. They imagine possibilities, then they execute relentlessly. And over time, those possibilities become reality. Now here's the most important truth Napoleon Hill discovered. Wealth is not a single decision. It is the result of daily mental discipline. Every day, you decide how to think, how to spend your time, how to respond to difficulty, how to use your money. Each small decision moves you closer to wealth or further away from it. Most people underestimate the power of these daily choices. But when repeated over years,